it's actually kind of funny, but the human brain is just terribly ill-equipped to process abstract emotional pain.
Oh, yeah, completely. I mean, we really struggle with it.
Right. So to cope with betrayal, we had to invent this entirely new vocabulary. And it's all based on, physical torture, bitter poisons, and like cold-blooded math.
Yeah, we don't just get mad. We build this massive linguistic architecture of retaliation.
Exactly. And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. Welcome in, everyone. Today we are looking at this brilliant language masterclass that unpacks this darker, deeply human side of English.
It's a fascinating source. It really digs into the mechanics of anger, retaliation, and karma.
Yeah, it explores why we use the specific metaphors we do when we want, the universe to basically balance the scales.
Yeah.
And learning these phrases isn't just about expanding your vocabulary. It's really like studying the architectural blueprints of human karma.
That's a great way to put it. You're basically learning how to map out a thriller, but in your own life. And this deep dive, it's going to trace the complete life cycle of vengeance. So from the exact moment an offense happens and sort of festers internally, to the calculated strike of revenge, and then all the way to the universe perfectly balancing the scales.
So let's just get right into that internal starting point.
Yeah.
Because before anyone actually takes revenge, the anger has to start somewhere internally.
It has to incubate.
Exactly. So let's look at the sheer emotional weight of holding on to a wrong.
Well, the incubation phase really relies heavily on spatial and physical metaphors because, like you mentioned, we just cannot process abstract feelings very well.
We need to make them tangible.
Right. If someone wrongs you and you refuse to let it go, that feeling doesn't just evaporate. Your brain has to put it somewhere. And the primary concept the analysis explores here is the physical metaphor of harboring a grudge.
Which is such an interesting phrase.
Yeah.
I mean, a grudge is already this heavy, toxic concept, but it's the verb to harbor that I find so fascinating.
It's very deliberate, isn't it?
Yeah, it implies a choice. You aren't just experiencing anger, you are actively providing it with a safe haven.
And that's the crucial distinction in the linguistics. When we use a physical space metaphor, like a harbor, we're talking about protection. A harbor is a safe, protected port where ships dock.
Right, safe from the storm.
Exactly. So when you harbor a grudge, you're literally taking this toxic, volatile anger and giving it a safe home inside your heart. You're refusing to let it leave.
You're just dropping anchor.
It's dropping anchor so it doesn't wash away. The analysis actually highlights a classic scenario to explain this. Imagine two siblings having a massive argument over an inheritance.
Oh, a tale as old as time.
Right. And a decade passes. 10 full years.
Yeah.
Yet one sibling is still harboring this massive grudge. They've kept that specific ship safely docked, perfectly intact, for a decade.
I mean, carrying that kind of internal weight everywhere you go, that has to take a massive biological toll on you.
Oh, absolutely.
Your cortisol levels would just be spiked constantly. And I imagine if you harbor a grudge for long enough, the brain eventually just demands resolution, right?
It does. The internal weight eventually demands external action. It forces this psychological demand for symmetry. We have an inherent aversion to asymmetry in relationships.
Which brings us to the mechanism of actually releasing that pressure. And that's captured in the idiom of settling a score.
Yes, settling the score.
Which honestly, it immediately makes me think of a Western movie. Like two guys staring each other down in the dust.
Well, you're spot on, actually. The origin is rooted right there in the American Wild West.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah. It's this fascinating historical mathematical metaphor. Because back then, in frontier towns, saloons and general stores didn't always use daily cash. It just wasn't practical.
So they ran a tab.
Exactly. The bartenders or clerks kept a literal tally, a ledger of debts. And that running tally was called your score.
Oh, wow. I had no idea that's where that came from.
Yeah. So at the end of the month, you'd come in, pay your debt, and bring the balance back to zero. You settled the score.
So you're literally just doing the math.
Right. And we take that exact financial math and map it onto human betrayal. When someone harms you, they're essentially extracting value from you.
They create an emotional debt.
Yes, an emotional deficit. You're now operating at a loss, and they have a surplus. So retaliating is how the human brain attempts to pay off that debt and bring the scale back to zero.
I love the corporate example they used in the source material for this. Like, say a rival CEO steals your top client one year.
That's a huge deficit.
Right. Massive deficit in the relationship ledger. So the next year, you go and aggressively recruit his lead developer.
Right, and boom, the balance is zero again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to push back on the negative connotation of this concept for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Because settling a score is usually seen as a really toxic, vindictive trait. But is it actually toxic? Or is it just our primal human desire for mathematical fairness asserting itself? I mean, it sounds a lot like emotional accounting.
I love that, emotional accounting. And the expert consensus actually leans toward your view. It's why humans crave this sense of zero balance. We are terrified of a world where actions don't have consequences.
Because then the rules don't mean anything.
Exactly. If someone can just harm you and walk away with a surplus, the social contract is completely broken. So craving that zero balance, it reassures our primal brains that we're safe.
That makes so much sense. Okay, so once the brain decides it absolutely must balance that ledger,
Right.
once you commit to settling the score, the question becomes, well, how do you execute it?
The mechanics of retaliation.
Right. And the source outlines two very different approaches here. The immediate strike versus the calculated delay. Or hot versus cold.
And the vocabulary here is just incredible. Let's look at the direct, immediate approach first. The hot reaction. When you want to forcefully restore balance right now, one of the most common idioms we use is giving someone a taste of their own medicine.
Which, I'll be honest, in a modern context, that feels a little weak to me. Like when I hear medicine, I think of some cherry-flavored cough syrup. It's not exactly a punishment.
Right, but you have to look at the 19th century metaphor behind it. Hundreds of years ago, medicine wasn't cherry-flavored at all.
Oh, I'm guessing it was pretty awful.
It was made of raw roots, harsh herbs, heavy alcohol. It tasted violently bitter and disgusting. It was something you really had to choke down.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the imagery is actually super dark. It's about forced ingestion of something vile.
Exactly. Imagine a really cruel apothecary who forces his sick patients to drink this nasty potion without any sympathy whatsoever. The ultimate irony, the perfect way to settle the score, would be forcing that same cruel apothecary to drink his own potion.
So idiomatically, you're engineering a situation where someone experiences the exact same terrible behavior they inflict on others.
Yes. For example, say you have a manager who constantly publicly criticizes his employees, just completely humiliates them.
A total nightmare boss.
Right. Well, getting a taste of his own medicine would be the regional director coming in and publicly criticizing that manager in front of his entire team.
Forced empathy. That is brilliantly symmetrical. But, as deeply satisfying as that immediate hot reaction feels, the source material actually contrasts that with a totally different approach.
Right, because hot anger is messy.
Exactly. And the alternative is captured in that classic cinematic proverb, revenge is a dish best served cold.
Oh, popularized by every mobster movie ever made.
Seriously. But I mean, why a dish? Why cold?
Well, think about the thermodynamics of the culinary metaphor. Boiling hot food represents passionate, immediate, sloppy reactions. You're reacting while you're still burning with anger.
Which means you're probably making mistakes. It's like a messy street brawl, which is hot.
Exactly. But freezing a dish, putting it away in the fridge, that requires time. It requires immense patience. Retaliation is often the most destructive when it's delayed.
It's the difference between that street brawl and a carefully planned chess checkmate, which is freezing cold. But why? Why does the element of delay and surprise make the cold dish so much more psychologically devastating for the person on the receiving end?
Because you're waiting quietly for months, sometimes years, until the enemy completely forgets about you.
You lull them into a false sense of security.
Right. You wait until their guard is entirely down, and then you strike with icy calculation. The example the material gives is so good. Imagine your colleague steals a major promotion from you.
Oh, that would make my blood boil.
Right. Most people would blow up, maybe yell at HR, but instead, you wait 2 full years.
2 years?
Yes, 2 years of quietly gathering evidence of their incompetence until you have enough to orchestrate a scenario where they are permanently fired.
Oh man, that is ruthless. But it's undeniably effective.
It is.
Okay, so we have the hot strike and the cold delay. But the deep dive brings up this third option that honestly blew my mind. Because what if the most ruthless strategy is no active strategy at all?
Strategic inaction.
Yes. Shifting from active retaliation to the sheer power of simply stepping back.
This is a dark one, but very prevalent in the modern corporate world. The idiom is to give them enough rope to hang themselves.
Which is such a grim execution metaphor when you really picture it.
It is very grim, but it's about dealing with enemies who are foolish and arrogant. The idea is if they're arrogant enough, you don't actually need to attack them.
You just supply the materials.
Exactly. You just hand them a very long piece of rope, and because they are so foolish, they will play with it and accidentally cause their own absolute destruction.
So idiomatically, it just means allowing someone to act freely without correcting them?
Right, not lifting a single finger, knowing full well their incompetence will ruin their reputation. Like letting a clueless new director talk completely uninterrupted in a board meeting.
Just letting them dig their own grave. But think about how much self-restraint this takes for you. I mean, human nature makes us want to jump in, interrupt, and prove the other person wrong immediately.
Oh, our egos scream at us to jump in.
Yeah. So why is this strategic inaction often the hardest yet most effective tool in a professional environment?
Because it keeps your hands entirely clean. If you interrupt that director, you look defensive, maybe petty. But if you sit back and just let the silence hang, everyone in the room sees their incompetence clearly. It's undeniable.
Wow. You just weaponize their own ego. Okay, so when that arrogant person finally trips up on their own rope or an enemy's actions finally catch up to them, we reach the final stage of the karma life cycle.
The punishment.
The final judgment. And the source divides this into two types, institutional and universal. Let's start with institutional.
Right, so this is when human systems step in. And the ultimate idiom here is to throw the book at someone.
Which is a judicial metaphor, right?
Exactly. Picture a judge sitting at a bench and they have this massive, heavy 1,000-page book on their desk containing every single law and penalty in existence.
The literal rule book.
The literal rule book. So instead of giving a light sentence, a furious judge metaphorically hurls that entire massive book at the criminal's head.
Meaning they apply the absolute maximum penalty allowed by the rules.
Right. Zero leniency, like an unremorseful embezzler getting 20 years, or a university having a zero-tolerance policy for plagiarism and expelling a student immediately.
Throwing the book at them. It's humans enforcing rigid rules. But the final idiom shifts away from human law entirely to the universe itself.
Poetic justice.
Yes, poetic justice, which is arguably my favorite one.
It's beautiful in a dark way. It actually originates in classic literature. It's this ironically perfect symmetrical outcome where a bad person is punished in a way that beautifully mirrors their specific sin.
It's when it feels almost too perfect to be a coincidence.
Exactly, like a CEO who coldly fires hundreds of people via mass email. And then a year later, that same CEO gets fired by the board via a 2-sentence text message.
Oh, the irony is just delicious. Or like a scammer who sells fake real estate to people and then loses all his money buying a fake painting.
It flawlessly mirrors the sin.
It really does. And I had this sort of philosophical observation about it, because throwing the book is about humans enforcing rigid rules. But poetic justice feels like the universe enforcing irony. Why are we so deeply satisfied by the symmetry of poetic justice? Is it because it proves to us that the world has a sense of humor?
I think it's even deeper than that. The world is often chaotic and unfair, right? Bad people get away with things all the time.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So when we witness poetic justice, it feels like a reassurance that there is some underlying moral architecture to the universe. It satisfies our deepest hope that karma naturally balances the scales, even if we do nothing.
Oh, that makes total sense. It reassures us. Well, as we wrap up this journey, I just want to recap what an amazing deep dive this has been. You're walking away fully equipped with this incredibly cinematic, ruthless vocabulary.
Absolutely. You now have the language to articulate office drama, historical novels, or just everyday human interactions.
Yeah.
And whether you are dealing with a bully, navigating complex corporate politics, or just enjoying a really good thriller, these idioms perfectly capture our universal desire for fairness.
They really do. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we just discussed.
Oh, I like this.
Think about our modern digital life. Today, every mistake, every arrogant email, every bad text is permanently recorded online.
The digital footprint never goes away.
Never. So does the internet make it easier for us to harbor a grudge forever since the receipt is always right there in our pocket? Or does it actually speed up the arrival of poetic justice since everyone is watching?
Oh, wow. That's a fascinating question. The rope to hang yourself is now a public timeline?
Exactly. So the next time you see karma unfold on your social media feed, ask yourself, has technology permanently altered the timeline of revenge? Has it rewritten the blueprint?
I guess we'll just have to watch and see.
We will. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a blast.
Stay curious, everyone, and we will catch you on the next one. Imagine like a general standing on this completely blood-soaked ancient battlefield.
Right. Just absolute chaos everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And the fighting has finally paused. You've got thousands of defeated, totally exhausted enemies who have dropped their weapons.
Surrendering.
Right. They're raising their hands, making this desperate plea for surrender, just waiting for the customary protocol of capture and ransom.
Which was the standard at the time.
Yeah, exactly. But instead, the general looks out over all this carnage, turns to his commanders, and gives this simple 3-word order that just completely extinguishes all human mercy.
Take no prisoners.
Prisoners. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are opening up what is basically a masterclass on the linguistics and the philosophy of extreme human conflict.
It's a heavy one today.
It really is. The source material we've gathered focuses on a very specific high-level vocabulary set that's often grouped under the theme of the scales of justice. But, let me be totally clear right out of the gate here. We're not just like memorizing flashcards today.
Oh, definitely not. I mean, we're really dissecting the architecture of vengeance here.
Yeah.
Because the sources we're looking at, they provide this fascinating linguistic roadmap for what actually happens when the human mind is pushed just completely past the boundaries of rationality.
As the breaking point, really.
Exactly. We're exploring the specific terminology that society has developed over centuries to articulate that transition. Going from a standard everyday disagreement into this desire for just absolute ruinous destruction of an opponent.
And the language we use to describe these psychological breaking points is just incredibly cinematic. I mean, it's wild. We are going to be pulling metaphors from apex marine predators, the brutal economics of ancient warfare.
Which is a whole rabbit hole on its own.
Oh, for sure. Plus, like, apocalyptic Cold War nuclear deterrence, and even some deeply visceral, arguably pretty grotesque 12th century physical mutilations.
It is a dark lexicon. It really is. But it's a necessary one,
Yeah.
Human beings have been romanticizing and systematizing conflict for millennia.
Right. It's built into us.
Yeah, and our language reflects that really deep-seated instinct. So the phrases we're going to unpack today, they aren't just idioms. They're basically historical artifacts that reveal the mechanics of human escalation.
Which brings us to why this matters to you, the listener. Because, by the end of this deep dive, you're going to walk away with a profound, C2 level upgrade to your linguistic toolkit.
Huge upgrade.
But more crucially, you are getting a psychological mirror. Because whether you are, navigating a cutthroat corporate merger or just trying to set boundaries in a highly toxic interpersonal relationship.
Or even just analyzing the subtext of a historical drama you're watching on TV.
Yes, exactly. Understanding this vocabulary is really your ultimate guide to recognizing the true cost of revenge before you actually have to pay it.
And if you look at the overarching narrative of these sources, it's essentially a timeline. Because conflict rarely begins at maximum intensity, right? It escalates.
The buildup.
Right, and that escalation usually begins as a very specific psychological shift. It's this catalyst moment where the desire for an equitable resolution just completely vanishes.
So let's isolate that catalyst. Say a perceived injustice occurs. Maybe a contract is breached, or a really harsh insult is thrown.
It's just a normal conflict trigger.
Yeah, and initially, the aggrieved party might just seek an apology, right, or a fair settlement. But then something triggers this neurological pivot. The frustration kind of curdles into a predatory instinct.
And the source material refers to this state as being out for blood.
Out for blood, which is such a striking phrase.
It is a masterpiece of biological metaphor, honestly, because to understand the psychological mechanism at play here, we really need to look at the animal it references.
Shark.
The great white shark, yeah. The source paints this picture of a great white cruising through the ocean. In its baseline state, the shark is largely just conserving energy.
It's not just indiscriminately attacking everything.
Right. It's navigating, perhaps casually observing its environment. It's not in an active state of aggression at all.
Right. It's just swimming. It's a part of the ecosystem, not actively disrupting it.
But then, the introduction of a single stimulus changes its entire biological operating system. When the shark's olfactory organs detect a microscopic trace of blood in the water.
And they can detect 1 part per million, right?
Exactly. Incredibly trace amounts. But when that happens, a profound shift occurs. The animal does not deliberate. It doesn't weigh the pros and cons of investigating this scent.
I don't think about it.
No, its predatory instincts totally hijack its nervous system. It transitions instantly into this violently aggressive, completely single-minded state. The only objective becomes hunting down the source of that blood and consuming it.
Wow. And the physiological change is irreversible in that moment. Like, there is no distracting a shark once that switch is flipped.
None whatsoever.
So mapping this onto human psychology, we are basically talking about an amygdala hijack. The prefrontal cortex, which is, the part of our brain responsible for logic and diplomacy and risk assessment, it essentially just goes dark.
That is the exact human parallel. When someone is out for blood, their cognitive framework shrinks. They are no longer interested in a restorative outcome.
Give me an example of that in human terms.
Okay, well, say if you accidentally damage someone's property, a normal reaction from them is to ask for the repair costs.
Right, sure, just fix what you broke.
But if that person is out for blood, they don't want the repair money. They want to ensure you lose your own home. They want you publicly humiliated. The objective pivots from justice to maximum inflicted pain.
I have to challenge the framing here, though, a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the phrase out for blood carries this inherent judgment. It implies malice, as if slipping into this predatory state is always like a moral failure.
Okay, I see where you're going.
But is this instinct inherently evil? Or is it, under certain extreme conditions, just a necessary psychological armor?
We'll define what you mean by armor in this context, because that's an interesting distinction.
Okay, think about the mechanics of like a role-playing video game.
Right.
You build your character with a balanced distribution of skills.
Right, your stats.
Yeah, your stats. You put some points into defense, some into negotiations, some into healing, and some into offense. And that balance allows you to navigate normal challenges.
Makes sense.
But occasionally, you get trapped in a room with a boss character who's dealing massive, relentless damage. Your defense is failing. Your negotiation skills are totally useless because the boss is programmed only to attack.
Right. Diplomacy is off the table.
Exactly. So the only way to survive the encounter is to pause the game, respect your character, and just dump every single point you have into pure offense.
Ah, I see.
You abandon the ability to heal or defend, and you become entirely single-minded about destroying the threat before it destroys you. So isn't being out for blood sometimes just a rational recognition that your environment has become so hostile that diplomacy is basically a death sentence?
That is a phenomenal way to reframe it. The respect analogy captures the utility of aggression perfectly, I think. You're right, it isn't always born of unprovoked malice.
Sometimes it's just survival.
Exactly. Sometimes slipping into a predatory mindset is just an evolutionary adaptation to an existential threat. When faced with an opponent who totally refuses to play by the rules of equitable resolution, leaning into pure offense might be the only viable survival strategy you have left.
It's the realization that you are in the water with a shark, so you have to grow teeth.
That's exactly it. The danger, however, and this is the warning embedded in the source material, is the collateral damage of that respect.
Right, because you lose everything else.
Exactly. When you allocate all your psychological resources to destruction, you forfeit your capacity for nuance. Look at the corporate espionage example provided in the text.
Okay, let's look at that.
Imagine a founder who discovers their revolutionary, patented technology was stolen by this massive, well-funded competitor.
Which is a devastating blow. I mean, the balanced defense and negotiation response would be to, file an injunction, sue for the lost revenue, and perhaps license the tech to them for a massive royalty fee.
Exactly. You balance the scales of justice and you ensure your own company's survival. That's the logical path.
Right.
But a founder who is out for blood abandons the royalty negotiation entirely. They want the competitor liquidated.
They want them gone.
Yeah. They will authorize legal expenditures that vastly exceed the value of the patent itself. They'll hire private investigators to uncover the rival CEO's personal scandals, They will launch aggressive smear campaigns.
Wow, so the original goal of saving their own company just becomes secondary?
Completely secondary. The new goal is annihilating the enemy, full stop.
And that tunnel vision is what makes it so dangerous. And I think this leads us to the tactical reality of this state. Because once a person or an organization is thoroughly out for blood, how do they actually operate?
They need a playbook.
Exactly. You can't just possess a predatory mindset. You need an operational framework to execute it. And the sources point us to a phrase that dictates the total removal of all operational boundaries. It's the decision to take no prisoners.
And we hear this phrase constantly in modern parlance, right?
All the time.
It is often thrown around as this somewhat edgy compliment in professional settings. You might hear someone describe a really formidable project manager or a relentless litigator as a take no prisoners kind of professional. It has been incredibly sterilized.
Totally sanitized for the LinkedIn crowd.
Exactly.
But the historical roots of this idiom are unimaginably grim. I mean, it's dark.
They are soaked in literal bloodshed. To really understand the gravity of taking no prisoners, we have to examine the economics and the protocols of ancient and medieval warfare.
Let's get into that, because this is fascinating.
Well, historically, warfare was not always about indiscriminate slaughter. When opposing armies clashed, the victorious side would frequently capture the surviving enemy combatants.
Right, these were the prisoners of war. But let's be clear for the listener, this wasn't like an early version of the Geneva Conventions, right?
Yeah.
They weren't capturing them out of profound empathy or human rights concerns.
Oh, no, not at all. It was a highly lucrative economic engine.
Right.
Captured foot soldiers could be sold into slavery or forced into manual labor, and captured nobles, knights, or commanding officers were even more valuable.
Because they had money?
Exactly. They were held for exorbitant ransoms paid by their families or their kingdoms, or alternatively, they were used as high-leverage bargaining chips to negotiate territorial concessions, or even the return of one's own captured forces.
So mercy on the ancient battlefield was essentially just a financial transaction. Like, surrender had monetary value.
Precisely. The sources emphasize that the practice of taking prisoners represented a sliver of mercy, albeit an economically motivated one. It meant that a defeated soldier had an out. If you were overwhelmed on the battlefield, you could drop your shield, raise your hands, and reasonably expect that your life would be spared. You would lose your freedom, obviously, but you would keep your life.
Which casts a really horrifying light on the alternative. When a commander explicitly raised the red flag, which was the historical signal to give no quarter, and ordered the ranks to take no prisoners, they were dismantling that entire economic incentive.
It was a directive of absolute annihilation. It literally instructed the soldiers to reject all pleas for surrender.
So even if someone is begging.
Even then, if an enemy dropped their weapon and begged for their life, the order required the soldier to strike them down anyway. It meant leaving no survivors to ransom, no survivors to trade, and no survivors to tell the tale.
It was the intentional removal of the very concept of mercy.
Yes, from the entire battlefield.
The psychological toll that must take on the soldiers executing the order is just difficult to fathom. But let's bring this forward a bit. We've taken this doctrine of ancient physical slaughter and, like we said, mapped it onto our sterile modern arenas.
We have.
When we say a corporate negotiation firm takes no prisoners, we are describing a methodology that just refuses to leave the opponent with any dignity or residual assets.
Right. The modern translation implies an environment where this kind of algorithmic, cold-blooded aggression replaces physical violence. But the intent to obliterate remains exactly the same.
Give me a modern example of that.
Think of a high-stakes litigation attorney, like in a divorce or corporate lawsuit. A standard attorney might aggressively pursue a favorable settlement, right? They recognize that bankrupting the opposing party might result in years of appeals and uncollectible judgments.
Right. You want them to be able to actually pay you.
Exactly. So they leave the opponent a tiny sliver of financial survival just so they will agree to sign the papers and end it.
So they take prisoners, metaphorically speaking. They leave the opponent alive enough to pay the ransom.
Exactly. But the attorney who takes no prisoners, they refuse the settlement. They weaponize the legal discovery process just to drain the opponent's financial reserves completely.
Wow.
They aim not just to win the case, but to ensure the opposing party loses their business, their reputation, and their livelihood. They completely reject the surrender.
But this strategy has a fatal flaw, doesn't it? I mean, think about it. If you operate in an industry, let's say you are a dominant tech monopoly, and your reputation is that you take no prisoners during acquisitions, well, eventually the ecosystem adapts, right?
Yeah, of course it does.
Founders stop taking meetings with you. Partners refuse to collaborate because they know that entering a room with you means one of you isn't walking out. It seems like a strategy that yields massive short-term gains, but just guarantees long-term isolation.
You have just hit on the core instability of the take no prisoners doctrine. It creates a vacuum.
A vacuum? How so?
Well, when an entity signals that they will offer no quarter, they force their opponents into a corner. If I am negotiating with you, and I know that surrendering means you are going to destroy me anyway, I have zero incentive to surrender to you.
Right. Because if the penalty for yielding is death, well, you might as well fight to the bitter end. You have nothing to lose.
Exactly. And that realization forces the losing party to adopt radical, truly desperate countermeasures. When you are trapped by a take-no-prisoners opponent and you realize you cannot win a conventional fight, your objective shifts.
You change the game.
You have to. You can no longer defeat the enemy, so you must defeat the victory itself.
Oh, wow. This is a brilliant pivot in the psychology of conflict. You stop attacking the invader and you start attacking the prize. And this moves us perfectly into the territory of the scorched earth policy.
Scorched earth is really the ultimate defensive manifestation of spite and strategic denial.
Yeah.
It's a calculated military tactic where a retreating army intentionally destroys any assets, infrastructure, or resources that could be of any use to the advancing enemy.
And the historical examples the sources provide for this are staggering in their scale. We aren't talking about, breaking a few tools on the way out the door.
No.
We are talking about the Russian military response to Napoleon's invasion in 1812.
The 1812 campaign is the definitive textbook example of this doctrine. I mean, Napoleon's Grande Armée was this logistical marvel, right? Arguably the most formidable military force on the planet at the time.
Unstoppable, basically.
Unstoppable. As they marched into Russia, the Russian High Command, led by General Kutuzov, realized a terrifying truth. They could not defeat Napoleon in a pitched, decisive battle. The French numbers and tactics were just too overwhelming.
So the Russian army begins to retreat. But they don't just fall back. They essentially weaponize their own homeland against the invader.
They systematically dismantle their own infrastructure. It's wild. As the Russian forces retreated eastward, they burned their own crop fields to ash.
Just destroying their own food supply.
Completely.
Right.
They slaughtered their own livestock and left the carcasses to rot, specifically denying the French any local food sources. They poisoned the freshwater wells.
Oh my God.
They burned villages to the ground so the invading troops would have absolutely no shelter against the impending winter.
The sheer disciplinary control required to order your own soldiers to burn down their own countrymen's farms it's hard to wrap your head around.
It goes against every instinct.
But the climax of this strategy is the burning of Moscow, right?
Yes. Napoleon finally reaches Moscow, expecting to find the crown jewel of Russia. A city where his exhausted troops can finally rest, resupply, and wait for the Tsar's surrender.
That was a prize.
But instead, he marches into a ghost town. The Russian governor had ordered the city evacuated and deliberately set it on fire.
Wow.
The French conquered the capital, technically, but they inherited a blazing ruin.
So Napoleon wins the territory, plants his flag, and then realizes he has conquered a graveyard.
Basically, yes.
And his army ends up starving and freezing to death because the victory was hollowed out from the inside. The psychological counterintuitiveness of this strategy is just fascinating to me.
How so? Like the self-destructive aspect?
Yeah, well, human beings are deeply driven by what's called the endowment effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
We overvalue what we own, and we possess this primal instinct to protect our property.
Right.
So the idea of intentionally destroying your own house just so a trespasser can't sleep in your bed, it violates every basic instinct of self-preservation. It's like, imagine being carjacked.
Okay.
A thief puts a gun to your head and demands the keys to your pristine, classic sports car. Instead of handing over the keys or trying to fight the thief, you just floor the accelerator and intentionally crash your own car head first into a concrete barrier at 80 miles an hour.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. You totaled the vehicle, and as you are sitting there in the wreckage, bleeding, you look at the thief and say, "There, it's yours."
That is an intense visual.
But you are severely injured, you have no car, but your satisfaction is derived entirely from the fact that the thief was denied the asset.
The car crash analogy perfectly distills the essence of scorched earth, though. You willingly absorb 100% the damage just to deny the adversary the utility of the prize.
Exactly.
And while burning cities feels like ancient history, this exact tactical framework is deployed routinely in the modern financial sector.
The corporate scorched earth. What does that look like when you trade torches for spreadsheets?
It usually manifests during hostile takeovers.
Okay.
So imagine a publicly traded company that is being aggressively pursued by a larger predatory rival. The board of directors realizes they cannot fend off the acquisition. The shareholders are going to sell and the rival will take control.
That's inevitable.
Right. The board, acting out of self-preservation or sheer strategic spite, decides to make the company so fundamentally toxic that the acquirer will essentially choke on it.
They poison the well before they hand over the deed.
Precisely. They might deploy what's called a poison pill strategy, intentionally diluting their own stock to make the purchase impossibly expensive. Or they might enact golden parachute.
Which are those massive payouts, right?
Yeah, clauses that guarantee the top executives tens of millions of dollars in payouts the very moment the company changes hands.
So they're draining the cash reserves on the way out.
Exactly. They might rapidly sell off the company's most valuable patents to a third party for pennies on the dollar, or intentionally take on massive, crippling debt just days before the takeover is finalized.
So by the time the predatory rival officially takes the reins, they aren't acquiring a thriving business at all.
Not even close.
They are acquiring this hollowed-out shell burdened with toxic debt and drained of all its top talent.
And on a more micro level, the sources highlight the disgruntled employee scenario.
Oh, I've seen this happen.
Right. A senior database manager knows they are being terminated on Friday. So instead of quietly packing their personal belongings, they use their administrative privileges to permanently delete the entire client database.
Wiping the servers.
Yeah, wipe the backup servers and corrupt the proprietary software on their way out the door.
It's the ultimate middle finger to the institution. But, here is where we really need to make a critical distinction in our analysis.
Okay, what's that?
When the Russian army burned Moscow, or when a board of directors executes a poison pill, those actions, while incredibly destructive, they are rooted in calculated strategy.
Right, they serve a purpose.
There is a cold mathematical logic to it. If I cannot extract value from this asset, I will ensure my enemy cannot either. It is a tactical decision.
That is a vital distinction to make, because as we move deeper into the linguistics of conflict here, we leave the realm of strategy behind completely.
We'll get into the messy stuff.
Yeah. Human beings are profoundly emotional creatures, and our conflict responses are so often dictated by flawed, reactive impulses rather than game theory. We frequently destroy things not to gain a strategic advantage, but simply because we are blinded by rage.
Which transitions us perfectly to what is, without a doubt, the most anatomically bizarre and visually disturbing idiom in this entire collection.
It really is.
So we need to dissect the phrase, cutting off your nose to spite your face.
It is a genuinely grotesque piece of imagery when you actually force yourself to visualize it.
Right, and to really grasp the psychology here, we first have to define the operational word, which is spite. Because spite is not strategy.
No, it's not.
Spite is the pure, unadulterated desire to hurt, annoy, or offend someone else, usually in retaliation for a perceived slight. It is totally reactive, and it is almost always petty.
And the etymology and historical context of this idiom are just fascinating. It emerged in the 12th century, and there are historical accounts, some verified, some apocryphal, of pious women, such as the nuns of Coldingham, who purportedly mutilated their own faces, literally cutting off their noses and lips.
Wait, really? Why would they do that? That's insane.
Well, they did it to render themselves physically repulsive to invading Viking marauders, hoping that the disfigurement would save them from assault.
Oh, wow.
Now, in that specific historical context, the mutilation served a twisted kind of defensive strategy. But as the phrase evolved into an idiom over the centuries, the strategic element was completely stripped away. It came to represent purely irrational self-sabotage.
The source material provides a prompt to help visualize the modern meaning, but I want to elevate it a little bit because we aren't talking about warding off Vikings anymore, We are talking about the ego overriding the survival instinct. So imagine you are looking in a mirror. You are so intensely furious at the concept of your own face. Maybe you think it insulted you. Maybe you just hate it in that moment.
Just blind anger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're so mad that you pick up a hunting knife and you slice off your own nose just to teach your face a lesson.
See, the logic is fundamentally broken there. You have successfully exacted your revenge, right? You have punished the face. But the face is inextricably attached to you.
You're the one in pain.
Exactly. You are the one bleeding out over the sink. You are the one who's permanently disfigured. You endure a catastrophic, irreversible loss just to inflict a minor penalty on a target that you are tethered to.
This is the absolute essence of self-destructive anger. Idiomatically, it describes a scenario where an individual overreacts in a moment of intense emotional volatility.
You see it all the time.
Right. They take a retaliatory action intended to punish someone else, but the blast radius of that action ends up destroying the perpetrator far more than the target.
Behavioral economists actually study this exact phenomenon using something called the ultimatum game. Have you heard of this?
I think so, but walk me through that. How does it work?
Okay, so in the ultimatum game, player A is given a sum of money, let's say $100. Player A must propose how to divide the money between themselves and player B.
Okay, simple enough.
Now, player B can either accept the proposal, in which case they both get the agreed-upon split, or player B can reject it. But if player B rejects it, neither player gets a single cent.
Okay, so logically, if player A offers, say, a 90-10 split, keeping $90 and offering player B $10, player B should just accept it, right? $10 is better than $0.
Exactly. Pure logic dictates you take the free money. A perfectly rational economic actor always takes the $10.
Right.
But human beings are not perfectly rational. Time and time again, studies show that when player B perceives the offer as fundamentally unfair or insulting, like a 90-10 split, they will reject it.
Even though it hurts them.
Yes. They will willingly walk away from free money, actively hurting their own financial position, solely for the satisfaction of punishing player A and ensuring player A loses the $90.
They literally cut off their own financial nose to spite player A's face.
Exactly. They prioritize the punishment of an adversary over their own well-being, and we see this play out in high-stakes environments constantly.
Let's apply this to a real-world scenario. Instead of a generic workplace spat, imagine two co-founders of a massively successful pre-IPO tech startup.
Okay, big stakes.
Right. Founder A discovers that founder B filed a crucial patent and left founder A's name off the paperwork. Founder A is furious.
Understandably.
Of course. But the logical strategic move is to quietly involve lawyers, rectify the paperwork, and proceed to the IPO where they will both become billionaires.
Right. Keep it in-house, fix it, and get paid. But founder A is acting out of spite.
Right. Founder A feels disrespected. Their ego is bruised. So, to punish founder B, founder A leaks the internal dispute to the press, accuses the company of fraudulent practices, and intentionally torpedoes the entire IPO.
Oh, man.
Founder B is publicly humiliated and loses their potential fortune. Founder A succeeded in their revenge.
But founder A also just incinerated their own billion-dollar payout and destroyed the company they spent a decade building. The punishment inflicted on the partner was vastly outweighed by the self-inflicted ruin.
You see it in family law, too, like two siblings fighting over an inheritance. Let's say the estate is worth $500,000. They're arguing over a minor discrepancy, maybe a piece of jewelry worth $5,000.
A tiny fraction of the total.
Exactly. But out of pure spite, one sibling refuses to compromise and drags the estate into years of brutal probate litigation. By the time the judge rules, the legal fees have consumed $450,000 of the estate.
So nobody wins.
Exactly. They burn down the house to win the argument over a single piece of furniture.
Which brings us to a deeply unsettling intersection in our analysis of human conflict. We have established that individuals and organizations are fully capable of calculated, take-no-prisoners ruthlessness.
Right, the cold logic of destruction.
Yes. And we have also established that they are equally capable of irrational, ego-driven self-mutilation out of pure spite.
So the terrifying question becomes, what happens when two of these entities collide? What happens when a take-no-prisoners actor meets a scorched earth actor and both are perfectly willing to cut off their noses?
The conflict reaches a point of hyper-escalation where kinetic action actually becomes impossible. It enters a state of ultimate, terrifying paralysis.
We're talking about the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MA.
The source material rightly identifies this as perhaps the darkest, most existentially dread-inducing idiom in the modern English language.
It really is.
Because unlike the previous phrases we have discussed, which describe actions or strategies, mutually assured destruction describes a permanent state of suspended terror. It is the guarantee of total annihilation.
And to understand the gravity of this term, we have to pull it back to its origins in Cold War nuclear strategy. Because this isn't just a clever phrase, it was the foundational geopolitical reality for half a century.
During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in an unprecedented arms race. Both superpowers amassed arsenals of thermonuclear weapons that were capable of eradicating human civilization multiple times over.
The destructive capacity was literally incomprehensible. I mean, we can't even fathom it.
No, we really can't. And the strategic paradox that emerged from that was deterrence theory. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction was essentially this grim mathematical guarantee that maintained the balance of power.
How did it work, practically?
It operated on a simple premise. If Nation A decides to launch a preemptive nuclear strike against Nation B possesses early warning radar systems.
Right, they see it coming.
Exactly. Before Nation A's missiles even re-enter the atmosphere to detonate, Nation B will have detected the launch and fired their entire arsenal back at Nation A.
So there is literally no scenario where you can strike first and survive. If you press the button to kill your enemy, you are simultaneously pressing the button to kill yourself.
Exactly. It creates a Nash equilibrium of terror. Both nations are entirely wiped off the map. There is no victor. There is only ashes.
I want to examine the philosophy of this for a moment, because we view MAD as this horrific apocalyptic concept. But I would argue that, paradoxically, it might be the most stable form of peace humanity has ever engineered.
That's a bold claim, but go on.
Think about it. If one side believed they possessed a perfect missile defense shield, if they thought they could attack and survive the retaliation, they would be incredibly tempted to strike.
Because they think they could win.
Right. The certainty of mutual ruin is the only mechanism strong enough to override the predatory instinct we discussed earlier. The absolute guarantee of death forces both sides to sit at the negotiating table, however tensely, with their hands folded.
It is the ultimate philosophical conundrum of deterrence. It is peace, yes, but it is a peace maintained purely by a gun held to the head of the entire world. It requires both actors to remain perfectly rational in their fear of death.
And when we scale this apocalyptic concept down from geopolitics to the corporate or interpersonal level, we see that same terror maintaining tense truces all around us. We use MAD to describe modern, non-kinetic conflicts where the arsenals aren't made of uranium, but of highly leveraged information.
Information is the nuclear weapon of the modern era. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about two massive tech conglomerates locked in a bitter dispute over market dominance. Both companies have dedicated corporate espionage teams. Both companies have stockpiled gigabytes of scandalous, legally compromising data on each other's labor practices, tax evasions, and regulatory violations.
Right, they've got dirt on each other. Company A would love nothing more than to hand Company B's illicit ledgers over to the Department of Justice.
But they can't, because they know that the second they leak that information, Company B's automated dead hand systems will immediately release Company A's internal communications, proving, say, massive consumer fraud.
So it's a standoff.
But total standoff. If one attacks, they both face federal indictments, crashing stock prices, and complete dissolution. So they maintain this aggressive, silent staring contest. They compete on the margins, but they never deploy the heavy artillery.
And the sources outlined a deeply toxic domestic scenario that mirrors this perfectly. The high net worth divorce.
Oh yes, the classic example.
Both partners have spent years quietly documenting the other's infidelities, financial crimes, and substance abuse issues. They loathe each other. They're entirely out for blood.
They want to destroy each other.
Right. But when they get to the mediation table, they sign a remarkably civil settlement. Why? Because going to trial and exposing the spouse means the spouse exposes them, destroying both of their careers and their social standing. The marriage ends in a terrifyingly quiet Mexican standoff.
Or look at the political realm. Two rival politicians who absolutely despise one another, yet consistently refuse to debate publicly or launch negative ad campaigns.
Right, the public wonders why they are playing so nice.
In reality, it is because leaking the opponent's embezzlement scandal guarantees the opponent will leak their corruption scandal. It's mutually assured destruction in action.
Living in a state of MAD must be psychologically corrosive, though. You are in a permanent state of high alert, suppressing the instinct to attack because the cost of action is suicide.
It requires an immense amount of cognitive load to maintain that tension over a long period. And history, along with our source material, tells us that eventually, inevitably, systems fail.
People snap.
People are not perfectly rational. The ego, the spite, that predatory instinct we've discussed, sometimes they just override the fear of mutual ruin. The standoff breaks, the tension snaps, someone pushes the button.
And the war happens.
Yes, the war happens. And because the modern world rarely results in literal mutual annihilation, someone usually emerges from the wreckage claiming to be the victor.
Which brings us to the final, really sobering chapter of our deep dive. We have to examine the aftermath. Let's say you survived the standoff. You took no prisoners, you navigated the scorched earth, you defeated the enemy, and you technically won the conflict.
Right, you got the prize.
But what does that victory actually feel like? What is the texture of success when the cost of winning was so unimaginably high?
That brings us to the ultimate phrase in our masterclass, a concept the sources explicitly note is a C2 level English mastery term, a Pyrrhic victory.
I am obsessed with the historical lore behind this phrase. I think it might be the most poignant lesson in military history.
It really is incredible. To truly comprehend a Pyrrhic victory, we have to travel back to 279 BC and examine the campaigns of King Pyrrhus of Epirus.
Let's set the scene for us.
So Pyrrhus was a brilliant ancient Greek king and general, often compared to Alexander the Great in his tactical prowess. He led a massive coalition force across the sea to Italy to wage war against the emerging power of the Roman Republic.
The Clash of Titans. And this leads to the Battle of Asculum.
Yes. At Asculum, Pyrrhus deployed a massive army, including tens of thousands of infantry, cavalry, and notably war elephants, which the Romans had never effectively countered before.
I mean, imagine facing war elephants for the first time.
Terrifying. And the battle was a bloodbath of epic proportions. It raged on for 2 entire days.
And Pyrrhus won, right? He broke the Roman lines. The Roman army retreated. By every technical definition of ancient warfare, Pyrrhus was the undisputed victor of the battle.
He secured the field. He won. But the reality of that victory was catastrophic.
Why?
Because the Roman legions were famously disciplined and unyielding. They inflicted staggering casualties on Pyrrhus's forces before retreating. Pyrrhus lost his finest commanders, a massive portion of his elite infantry, and a significant number of his irreplaceable elephants. His army was decimated.
And he's stuck in Italy.
Right. He was 1,000 miles from home with no way to resupply or reinforce his troops. Whereas the Romans, despite losing the battle, could simply draft tens of thousands of new citizens from the surrounding regions and rebuild their army in a matter of weeks.
So Pyrrhus is standing on the battlefield. He is surrounded by the corpses of his best friends and his finest soldiers. He holds the territory, but he has fundamentally lost his power. And the sources highlight his legendary response when one of his officers attempts to congratulate him on the triumph.
Right. Looking out over the staggering carnage of his own forces, Pyrrhus reportedly says, "If we are victorious in one more battle with the Romans, we shall be utterly ruined."
Utterly ruined. By winning. It is such a profound, tragic realization of the limits of conquest, and that historical moment crystallized into the idiom we use today.
It did.
A Pyrrhic victory is a success that comes with such devastating losses, whether those losses are financial, physical, or emotional, that the victor feels completely empty. The victory is functionally indistinguishable from a massive defeat.
The cost of acquiring the prize far exceeds the inherent value of the prize itself. It's like you win the sprint, but you permanently cripple your legs in the process.
And this maps so heavily onto everyday life. You see people chasing Pyrrhic victories constantly, blinded by the need to be right.
Oh, absolutely.
Think back to the neighborhood property line dispute we kind of touched on earlier. Imagine a homeowner who discovers their neighbor's fence is encroaching on their property by exactly 6 inches. The neighbor refuses to move it.
And the homeowner is out for blood. They hire a take-no-prisoners litigator.
Exactly. They spend 3 years locked in depositions, court hearings, and appeals. The stress of the lawsuit causes them to develop high blood pressure. They alienate everyone else in the neighborhood. They spend $150,000 in legal fees.
All for 6 inches.
Right. Finally, a judge rules in their favor.
Yeah.
The neighbor is forced to tear down the fence and move it back 6 inches.
The homeowner won. They defended their property line.
But they sacrificed 3 years of their peace of mind, their health, and $150,000 for 6 inches of dirt. It is a textbook Pyrrhic victory. The emotional and financial ruin just completely dwarfs the triumph.
Or take it to an even more intimate level, the destruction of a relationship just to win an argument. You are in a heated dispute with your spouse over something fundamentally trivial, but you refuse to yield. You decide to take no prisoners.
You want to win at all costs.
Right. You systematically corner them with logic. You weaponize their past mistakes against them. You verbally scorch the earth until they finally break down, cry, and admit that you were right.
You successfully proved your point.
Yeah.
You are the undisputed victor of the argument.
But in the process of securing that victory, you said things so viscerally cruel, so profoundly damaging to the foundation of trust, that you have permanently altered how your spouse looks at you.
Wow.
You won the battle of the evening, but you initiated the collapse of the marriage. The prize was being right, but the cost was your future.
Which is why understanding this vocabulary is so critical. These words are not just descriptors, they're diagnostic tools for us.
They really are.
So how do we synthesize all of this? Let's recap the journey this source material has taken us on today.
Well, we examined the entire life cycle of extreme human conflict. We started with the catalyst, the predatory biological spark of being out for blood, where logic succumbs to the instinct to punish.
We then explored the operational reality of that aggression, the institutional mercilessness of ordering your forces to take no prisoners.
From there, we descended into the desperate, destructive strategies of denial, the calculated logistical devastation of a scorched earth policy.
Followed by the tragic, petty irrationality of purely emotional sabotage, the willingness to just cut off your nose to spite your face.
Then we analyze the paralyzing equilibrium of terror when destructive forces collide, staring into the abyss of mutually assured destruction.
And finally, we surveyed the devastating emptiness of the aftermath, the hollow, ruinous tragedy of the Pyrrhic victory.
It is a heavy psychological burden to process all of this, but as a listener, the value here is immense.
Absolutely.
Because this C2 level vocabulary provides you with a conceptual framework to evaluate your own conflicts in real time. These phrases carry the weight of empires falling and global standoffs. So the next time you feel your frustration metastasizing into a desire for vengeance, use this lexicon as a checklist.
That's great advice.
Ask yourself, am I acting like the shark? Am I burning down my own assets to punish a rival? Am I marching toward a victory that will leave me utterly ruined?
It's a mirror for our own worst impulses. And honestly, analyzing this spectacular, deeply historical vocabulary leaves me with a final, lingering thought for you to mull over.
What's that?
Well, the sources today prove that humanity has developed an incredibly rich, poetic, and globally understood lexicon to describe extreme revenge and systemic destruction.
We really have.
Right. We draw metaphors from apex predators, kings, and nuclear Armageddon, just to articulate how badly we want to hurt each other. But it begs a fascinating, almost tragic question about the fundamental nature of our species. Yeah. If we have such an expansive, deeply ingrained linguistic framework for tearing each other apart, why don't we have an equally vivid, universally recognized C2 level vocabulary for profound de-escalation?
That is a really good point.
Where is the cinematic, awe-inspiring terminology for radical forgiveness, or for the intentional surrender of ego, or for finding common ground in the face of hatred? Are we as a species simply hardwired by our evolutionary biology to romanticize the battle, even when we have thousands of years of historical proof that the battle will ultimately ruin us?
That is a profound paradox to leave our audience with. It really highlights what we value enough to actually name.
Keep that in mind the next time you find yourself standing on the edge of a conflict, feeling the urge to take no prisoners. Are you genuinely searching for resolution, or are you just looking for an excuse to go to war and earn a hollow victory? Thank you for joining us on this masterclass. We will see you on the next deep dive.
Until next time, choose your battles wisely.